Good morning, guys, and welcome to the Daily Breakdown. Obviously, since Thorn stole China Talk, we get to do, no, we're doing China Talk, even though he totally stole all of our talking points, but it's okay. We got better panelists. Of course, we do have the same
Wow.
Drexxin. Oh, yeah, I said it. Suck it, Dexter. He did look very handsome, though, with his nice white headset. Just so everyone knows, that was sarcasm. I actually really like Dexter. We do have Drexxin representing Esports Heaven, though, also on our panelists. Joining him will be Kelsey Moser, representing On Gamers, and our special Korean expert guest representing from GG Chronicles. Yeah, you're gonna go with it.
GG Chronicle, I guess
Yeah,
it's fine. Yeah, sure.
He's like, I don't want to be the Korean expert. No,
I'm
but
not.
to balance out our fan blasted Chinese bias.
Oh my goodness.
For our discussion of upcoming OMG versus Najin White Shield, we got Kriz with us, so that's super exciting. I'm totally just winging this right now, so let's just start with the most exciting news. Actually, I told Adam, I was like, we're gonna start with EDG versus Starhorn Royal Club. No, screw that. We're gonna go straight into the most breaking news. #FreeCloud. We did it, boys. We shamed Dada7 into stepping down. No, I don't know what the actual... I think that the translation on ongamers.com just says something like releasing the roster doesn't give a reason. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kelsey. But it was rumored that Dada7 was considering stepping down due to the negative feedback that he had gotten from the fan base, which has now been released that Cloud will be playing on OMG's roster for tomorrow's game against Najin White Shield. And before we can even break down to that, like, I just wanted to get that, yes, it has been announced. It was announced on the Daily Breakdown, unfortunately, because China Talk gets to go second.
It was announced on ongamers.com, though.
Ongamers.com.
Yeah.
You know,
Always on.
And we'll get back, because I feel like we should describe kind of the history of Cloud and what people should expect from him, because we've given him a lot of hype, but obviously let's now take it back, go back to EDG, Starhorn Royal Club. I think every single one of us thought that EDG was going to win. I think that was on record.
Don't lump Kriz in with us. Maybe he didn't think they were going to win.
Kriz, who did you think was going to win?
No, Starhorn, I'll be honest. Being a fan of Korea, I've been paying attention mostly to Starhorn, so I guess I do have a little bit of a personal attachment with them just because of in second Zero. Zero, in particular, actually, I was quite interested in because of his position as support and his history subbing as a support for KT Rolster previously. So I was really kind of personally rooting for them, I guess, in that regard.
So your only attachment to rooting for Starhorn Royal Club was the fact that it had Korean players?
Well, not so much attachment, but I guess like a sort of familiarity. So they were kind of my gateway into the world of LPL, I guess, if you want to put it that way.
And why did you think that they were going to win? Was it because of these players like Zero or Insec, or was it just because they thought that they were far and above the superior team?
Well, I couldn't really judge just from the limited knowledge that I had from the other teams in general, but I just kind of had to just pick a horse, I guess, and go with it. So unfortunately, I didn't really have much else to go. Are you talking about the? It was hard just going out of groups, I guess. So
you were just looking at World's performance, really, and going from
yeah, exactly. So I know EDG, they had the opportunity to show a little bit more convincing play. I know that it was going to be really difficult to beat Samsung White, but they had to play against the other two teams and show up for those. And the AHQ set was a little bit of a red flag for me heading into their series against Royal Club. And while Royal Club, they had the benefit of having the really easy group without any Korean teams, but...
So here's actually an interesting question that I want to ask you. So you say that the AHQ set... So would you say that your expectation of EDG was relatively low, that you didn't think that they were a high-performing team? Like, what did you think that the matchup was going to look like? Like, obviously you favored Starhorn World Club, but did you think that EDG was just above and beyond going to get outclassed? Did you think that EDG got above and beyond outclassed, or did you think did this set change your mind on them?
It was odd because as soon as I guess heading into the group, for the pick'em originally. I guess on paper, I thought that EDG would take that series, but it's so weird how a series plays out. It's kind of like its own self-contained set of games because you can't really judge just on paper alone. I mean, obviously hindsight is 2020 here, but the way that match played out, even though we were even treated to that whole curse of insect and best of five sort of scenarios, it just evolved over time. Like at first I thought it was going to be the Zero show, like just him doing
It wasn't
really
the Zero show. That Jana play.
that Jana play is amazing, and if you think about it, if he like every single game he was on Jana, they won that game. And if he was not on Jana, they pretty much lost. And I think, like, as much as Zero is just kind of my boy in that in that group, and as much as I like Insec, like, he's just kind of Insec is Insec, and he's always going to be like that. But it's just the way they kind of adjust. And I won't say adjusted because, like, obviously Starhorn's not that kind of team that kind of just adapts their play style. I guess they're kind of just like they're very straightforward in terms of how they want to go about winning their games. But I just think that there was like some sort of switch after that. What was it? Was it game 3 or game 4 where Uzi just, you saw him at the end of that game and he was just like almost lost his composure completely. Like
that was game 4.
That was game 4.
Didn't join his team. Yep.
Yeah, no, it was so weird to see how a player would respond. Like at that point, it's one of those really awesome sports narratives where like you just kind of throw the stats out the window. You just want to see how Uzi does. Like at first, like the story of the entire set, like for me was Zero, but Uzi, how he responded in game 5 was just something magical. And I think out of the two teams, if I were to put my money on a team that would kind of have that special thing happen, I would have said Starhorn for sure.
So, and now I'm going to kick it over to Drexxin and to Kelsey. Give me bullet points. Like, explain to me, walk me through, like, the analytical decision to choose EDG and to put EDG ahead over Starhorn Royal Club. Because popular consensus is that a majority of people who don't have any experience with LPL would say or said that Starhorn Royal Club was going to win simply because, like Chris said, they just showed better at the world's group stage. Like, it looked like the stronger team. So break it down for me. Why did we all say that EDG, like, what do we know that, like, what did we see?
I have bet against EDG too many times. Pretty much to say, like, I watch how they perform in the LPL regular season and both spring and the summer, and it wasn't unlike their performance against AHQ, Dark Passage, and White. They pretty much just kind of scrambled. Like in the spring season, they could not win a game against OMG, and pretty much every single game was just a destructive stomp. There was like a 20-minute surrender on EDG's part at 1.2. But then, like, watching them play the playoffs and that international esports tournament, which is another tournament that, contrary to their name, is actually an all-Chinese tournament.
It's by the government.
Yeah, so where they actually managed to 2-0 OMG very convincingly that spring. And then the playoffs, they did really, really well again. Even though they didn't face OMG, they decisively took games off Invictus Gaming, who they had never had a game against that, who despite having 4-0ing Invictus Gaming during the regular season, they never had a game against Invictus Gaming that went less than 40 minutes, and then they forced them into a 26-minute surrender in the playoffs in one game. It was just really disgusting and destructive. And then the regular season came back. They were playing like that again for a while, but then they started to slack off. Clearleft started to just like overfarm the jungle and play really passively. The lane started playing passively. Even the vision started suffering. They looked really bad, like they were regressing. People started talking about, maybe the team is upset, what's going on. And then they had this set against World Elite where they 2-0'd World Elite and they looked a lot stronger at the end, and that just barely clinched them into the first place in regular season, so they got the first seed going into playoffs. Then in playoffs, they come out, just destroy everyone. OMG this time has to surrender at 20 minutes in the grand finals, right? So it's just, they look really good when they're on their game. And so my feeling is that they have some control over when they can turn it on. obviously that didn't happen here. So 2 splits, I always said, is maybe not statistically significant enough, and maybe they'll just choke and maybe they'll not show up at all. I think they did somewhere in between there, but yeah, it's kind of
So are you saying even when EDG showed up, like in game, what, 3 and no, let's go game 4. Was that the EDG that we expected, or was that still not the EDG that you knew could show up?
No, I mean, Name didn't play as well as I've seen him play the entire tournament. That's just a big factor in that. Like, you played really well. Clearlove played really well. Like, that's the thing. I think that's usually the X factor, because usually Name plays well, right? Usually the X factor is whether or not Clearlove shows up and whether or not Clearlove magically learns how to jungle. Like, the difference between Clearlove jungling, which we saw where he was ganking Koro and just snowballing Koro out of control. He had this pressure in the bottom lane with the pink wards that prevented Uzi from getting anywhere. And then versus how he was in the early games, playing Lee Sin, not getting any ganks anywhere, and then just going full insect mode in that early dragon fight. And just that variance is what usually is the difference between the EDG, the good EDG, and the mediocre EDG. But this time it was not man. He just didn't come. He didn't show up. So.
Drexxin, I have questions for you now. As we kind of like continue on this, and you can flesh out your reasonings that Kelsey kind of covered as well. EDG, the EDG that we saw today, that to me, even when they were playing well, because EDG, we call them baby blue because they were very much like Samsung. I did not see that team at all today. And do you think that was on part of Name failing to perform, that they didn't have that late game, deft type of carry? Because they went completely, like, they never play a hyper aggressive early game. That does not happen from EDG.
It's a mixture of things. Like, obviously, okay, like in terms of Name's performance, I mean, let's face it, the series was like dead close. Now, like, picture that, but with like Name, who's typically seen as like the best 80 carry in the region, and then you consider how strong Uzi performed. Think of that best of 5 with Name at that peak level instead of Uzi, right?
Let's draw a picture really quick before you kind of continue on. So just to be clear, like there is a very valid debate between who is the best 80 carry in China. During this last split, it's always been between Wei Xiao, Name, and Uzi. So let's just everyone just think about the Uzi that you saw today, just how amazing that he's a god, he's a mechanic, he's just know that during the LPL split, there was a debate that lots of fans and teams would have that Name was on that same pedestal. That is the Name that we were expecting to see.
And it wasn't even a debate during the regular season, was it? Like, it wasn't.
I think
a lot of people put Uzi third, actually.
Yeah.
before Weijia retired, honestly. So it's crazy.
I think it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard for people that don't want to go back and do the research to conceptualize that. And I fully understand that, because the play we've seen from Uzi is like 80 carry mechanics we haven't seen anywhere or anywhere else besides,
Name and Wei Xiao were doing exactly the same shit.
Yeah, they were, but just didn't show up. But
continue on your post, sorry.
Yeah, but additionally, like you were saying, it was completely different. It wasn't like the EDG that like holds out and like has these godly team fights late games and win. Like, they played okay, and relative to their performance to Starhorn Royal Club in like former meetups where Royal Club narrowly has the overall win advantage. Like, it's still like wasn't stylistically the same. And I actually brought this up in the daily breakdown too, but I'll reiterate it, that I found really interesting is that Starhorn Rail Club's like they had Vikel try to get the team to reorganize the play and just completely shift the way the team distributes their wealth and pressure on the map and stuff like that.
Off of Uzi.
And then what ended up happening was the same shit with Uzi, and then EDG started doing this like weird experimental play that we didn't see outside of the regular season when they tried doing this like super hyper aggressive like early jungle invading and stuff like that. So it was really confusing to see that they weren't even like stylistically similar, and in some cases Starhorn Royal Club proved to be the better endgame team. So yeah, it was a lot of different things. It was kind of weird
that you brought up Vical, because I want to kind of touch now back onto the point that Chris made about Uzi coming off of that loss. Like, we saw his face and everything. Let's talk about his Vayne game, okay? Because there's kind of like rumors or conversation going around that when he picked Vayne that game, that he was like, his head, I guess people were saying, his headset was off. He was kind of like really out of tune with the team. If we think back to the INSEC Uzi drama that kind of broke right before Worlds, where Uzi like lost his shit and was like, oh, I'm not gonna go to World and things like that, like the manager being fired or replaced or whatever the exact situation around that. Apparently in that game, that was too when he said, I wanted to play Vayne, but they were, trying to move away from that play style of protect the AD carry and things like that. And so they picked him Lucian early, and then I guess he locked in Vayne further down champ select, so they ran the Lucian jungle. I know what they are trying to like, but that's like, well, here we have the same thing. Like, this is what I'm trying to pull from that. So you have that situation. Yes, there's a lot of controversy of, what really happened there. They were saying that Lucian jungle was actually a thing and that they had been practicing it and things like that. But then again, we have a situation where Uzi looks very clearly upset. He seems very disengaged from his team, and then he insta-locks the Vayne pick. I mean, do you think that there was similar? I mean, obviously, do you think there's similar situation there?
Do you remember how early he picked that Vayne?
It was
that
the
within
fourth.
The first
it was
he picked it for himself.
For himself. Okay.
Yeah.
It was weird because I kind of remember that entire composition, and it was just pretty much 5 playmakers and very little wave clear.
For me, that this is gonna sound really weird, but that's like the typical Starhorn Royal Club composition. They pick these.
So much cleanup.
Yeah,
One of us will do it.
Fizz is our Corn is a really good Fizz player, and unfortunately, Name is a really good AD carry. Neither of that came to the world stage. You wouldn't believe it, but in LPL, people actually ban Fizz against Corn every single time. You cannot let him have that champion. Then he comes to the world stage and he just straight up feeds. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Well, it isn't strange for me because there was a game where Insec played Shaco, and yeah, Insec played Shaco, and Insec has played Shaco in the past. But in this game, this was the last game that Starhorn Royal Club played in the regular season. They couldn't really advance their seeding. It wasn't looking like they could because they had just lost the first game against Invictus Gaming, and then they had to play one more against them in the best of 2. So Insec decides he wants to play Shaco, and they're all laughing. And they think this is hilarious, and they get Kassadin, Shaco, Jax.
He played AP Shaco.
He played a hybrid Shaco because he had AP runes and masteries, but he built the Shiv and stuff.
Well, he wanted to do the most damage with his
yeah. He actually, when he went down
the
21, he took both penetrations. It was bizarre.
Yeah, but anyway, the point is that they did Jax, which Cola likes to play, and it fell out of meta, which, by the way, both of Cola's champions fell out of meta. Aurelia is not his signature champion.
Jax is his signature champion.
He played Jax. Insec played Shaco. Corn played Kassadin, actually, and then Insec, and then Vayne was played by UZI. So we had all of these 4, and then it worked together in this really bizarre way. It was like this chase composition where they just chase you down, and one of them will kill you, right? And that's how I think of Starhorn Royal Club playing, and that's how they like to play. Obviously, this composition
that's
that
the
they
game
ran
he got his pentakill, right?
Yeah, that was the game he got his
against
pentakill.
IG. Okay, yeah.
They just want to rely on this mechanical brute forcing to get their kills and to scare people enough into this scattered frenzy that they can chase them down and kill them. And I think that's kind of almost what they were going for here. So from that perspective, the Vayne almost makes sense if they're all just kind of YOLOing it and deciding, okay, maybe this will work. But I don't know.
He was in tears, Kelsey. He
was in tears after that
visibly
game,
upset.
He was in tears after that game, though. So obviously he was very intent, and he wanted to play Vayne, and it's possible that the comms were I'm just going to play Vayne, and they all just sort of went, screw it, and picked a bunch of chase champions, but I don't know. It's really weird because maybe that's just Starhorn Royal Club has been mad all split, and so they've played really dumb compositions like that. All split because they've all been mad and been no, I'm carrying this game. No, I'm carrying this game.
Let's
yeah.
All 5 of them want to carry the game.
All 5 of them, yes.
At the same time.
We've done this a few times on the show previously, but we haven't done it yet on the On Gamers platform, and so I want to talk about this today. The history of Starhorn Royal Club. And Drexxin, I'm going to give it to you. Because again, when I talk about it, I like to say it was literally a graph. here was Worlds that Starhorn Royal Cup, was in the finals, and then immediately they took a nosedive. And it wasn't until very recently that we started to see this Royal Club, which again has a factor into a lot of us putting EDG above them on the pedestal. So please give me a breakdown. Tell me about BOW. Tell me about Starhorn Royal Club.
Okay, this is going to take a while. Because before I just go specifically into Starhorn Royal Club, I want to let people understand something and why most people guessed EDG to win the set is because off the evidence available, 2 splits, it's pretty much all we had to go off of, based on history. I don't know why, but on LoL Esports, they painted this narrative that these teams have been facing each other for years.
For years.
For years. And then they
Years.
backtracked and said, well, they meant across different teams. But the thing is, Starhorn Royal Club right now is actually
The roster's
consisted of a lot
completely
of
new.
a lot of amateur players that
Yeah.
have never even competed in the LPL. So that's just flat out bullshit. They
And
literally
Korean
have
players,
not.
too.
They literally
Yeah.
have not played against each other for years. That's just straight up wrong. Okay, and then, secondly, yeah, a lot of people seem to have issues with Uzi's attitude or something. This is something I wanted to touch up on before the history because it ties into the history. Uzi's been in such a crappy position for so much of his time outside of Worlds, where he's been super sandbagged, and he had to deal with BOW as support. He had this conflict where he didn't know what really wanted to play because he didn't trust his support. This time, it's understandable that he would be so upset because he's this young guy, and for the first time ever, he feels like he has this team that can actually make it to the finals. And then, you get to the 5th game after it's so convincing, and it's wow, I thought I had this I had this really solid team. How is this happening, kind of thing, And he's a young guy, but yeah, that's my own thing. I really hate that people are hating on Uzi for his immaturity or whatever. When the shit he's had to go through is absolutely ridiculous. Nobody has been sandbagged as hard as this guy. With that said, Starhorn Royal Club, when they started out, were a nobody team. Literally, didn't fucking matter. They actually had a few players from current LMQ. And then before benching them because they underperformed and switched out.
The salt.
Of which I believe are Zhao Zhao and Fish.
Godlike.
Yeah. Well, Godlike came later. Godlike came later.
Was later.
Oh, okay.
And so this team got nothing done. But then they eventually formed a team that could make it to Season 3 Worlds somehow. Literally, this team went from being
White's,
completely
Lucky,
insignificant.
Godlike, Uzi, and Tabe.
Yep.
Tabe.
This team, backtracking a little bit, Tabe actually retired and then was asked to come back, so he came back again.
Oh.
So Tabe retired twice, but came back to try to qualify for Worlds. They ended up making Worlds by upsetting OMG and then upsetting OMG again in the quarterfinals. Quarterfinals. So yeah, this was a team that was completely insignificant and then somehow managed to climb to this area where they somehow continuously got top 3 finishes, got to Worlds. After Worlds, the team shattered again. This is what we were talking about with the wavy format of how Royal Club's performance is, because they started here, went here, and it's wow, this is a team that if they stick together, maybe they can, figure something out and just stay world class. But no, everything fell apart. Literally, Uzi, only remaining member on that lineup. Tabe retired, White's retired, wasn't paid, whatever. Godlike moved to LMQ.
Oh, yeah.
Lucky retired. He was fucking bad. The only replacement that was actually good on the new post S3 Worlds Royal Club was actually KMI replacing Lucky. That is the one position I will admit was actually an improvement.
Right, you had NCT, BOW.
NCT. His solo inners were
and
god awful. BOW
But
is
this is even before, because Uzi played mid for a while, right? And then they
The
had
Vayne mid.
NCT in the top lane, and they had Lei playing AD carry, which apparently Lei is a support main, which explains why he was so awful. And then XJJ, and he's apparently actually a pretty good support, but XJJ played support, and that was pretty bad too.
It's just a complete cluster. Continue, Drexxin.
But yes, and then they did the swap again, and then we had BOW in support, and we had Yao top lane, and then we had NCT mid.
It was fucking terrible. They almost got relegated. They literally almost got relegated.
What? You're telling me that Starhorn Royal Club that just performed against EDG was almost relegated at the start of this year?
They're almost relegated, and they were almost out of there with positive energy and all this other shit, and holy shit. And then they farmed Starhorn Royal Club in the summer, which is a huge transformation, but wasn't as pretty as it looks now. It was basically Insect doing the same shit, but just relentlessly feeding because the team hadn't naturally formed the synergy to follow up on his ridiculous plays.
I think it was his first game. He went to invade blue buff.
UZI did the same thing, right? He would.
Yeah.
They were both trying to do the same thing, and Corn and Colo were just like, "What am I supposed to do with this?"
And then
I have no idea.
The strange dilemma was: do we try to play a more refined play style, like and like calm down a bit since we have these communication issues, or do we just roll with it? And right now, like, despite being a sloppy players or as a team, they're going into semifinals because this is like the culmination of them just like getting used to this ham play style that they've all like formed together. So like it was like the Starhorn Royal Club is like literally just a bunch of like trial and error with like just how deep they could go and like the limits of their carelessness.
Starhorn
To
YOLO
the point
Club.
where now it feels like they have some kind of structure or strategy, but it's just because like they just I don't know, they like telepathically figure out like what's good, like where to dive and stuff like that. So yeah, you had the spring where like okay, this team was almost world champion, obviously pales in comparison to SKT whatever, but they are almost world champion, almost get relegated in a very weak spring LPL split, and then they come back up and then they make it to worlds again. So this team has kind of like done this miracle in terms of going from nearly relegated to winning or getting this far in worlds twice in a row.
And they were
And
like
that
a fourth place LPL team.
Yep.
For most of the season, and they just kind of flipped this switch in week 8, and they made this pretty convincing run for almost first place, right? So they ended up tied for second, but because OMG had more 2-0s overall, Starhorn Royal Club didn't actually have that many 2-0s. They ended up taking the second place for regular season. So.
And additionally, this was also the patch where 2v2s were a lot more significant.
Right.
You could brute force rather than the strategic play, which
The meta
obviously is
catering
lacking,
to
but they're
UZI.
still figuring out synergy and communication and all that jazz. But yeah, that's where we are now, and it's been crazy for Royal Club. Like, if you thought other teams were inconsistent from the West, like holy fuck, this team has gone. This team
And
has
I think
gone
it's
rock bottom to like world's contenders twice.
Also really because we're talking about kind of the high point when Starhorn Royal Club really started to turn on. That was also kind of the point where OMG had their big showing and then they started to make their almost immediate decline. And the fact that, again, we talked about how like we just saw UZI's amazing performance. You know, everyone's saying, you know, Name shit, Name overhyped, he's awful. And the fact that we painted this picture that Name and UZI, you know, throughout the season with Wei Xiao were performing on pretty much the same level. That it was a huge argument and very hard to tell who was the best AD carry. You can also say the same thing that OMG, like that OMG from group stage, Kriz, what do you think about OMG? Do you think that they're anywhere near Starhorn Royal Club's caliber? Because let me tell you, they were far and superior, the best team in LPL for a good majority of that season.
If you told me that, I wouldn't have believed you. I mean,
yeah.
Oh gosh, I think it was just a matter of them being so up and down. I didn't even think that they were going to make it out of groups to begin with, just based on their earlier games, particularly against LMQ. And I guess somehow they kind of benefited from the fact that LMQ kind of just fell off towards the back half of that group stage. And I don't know, I guess obviously you're going to see Blue make it out. So it was just a matter of who was going to fight for that last spot. And I don't know, I think for me, it was going to be either OMG or Fnatic. My original pick was going to be OMG. I'm not particularly sold on Fnatic specifically for this year, at least. They've played really well over the course of their entire time together, even dating back from last year's Worlds. But you could sort of see like a little bit of that sort of tiredness, particularly from Soaz and Cyanide. And there was a lot of talk towards the end that like Soaz has to probably calling for his retirement or something, or just some sort of shakeup from the top lane or jungle positions, possibly with Xpeke too. And I don't know. I didn't believe in anybody from that group other than Reckles and Yellowstar. Reckles like just played his heart out the entire group stage. And if I were to go pick a team just based on that one person to carry the rest of the team, either Reckles or Cool, I know this is Reckl's his first Worlds. I'm not sure if it's cool. I'm not sure his
He was in
Cool
the last one.
Yeah.
he was in the last one, so like he's been there before. So like you get someone with that sort of experience, and I'm of that belief that experience counts for something, and continuity does count as well for that sort of thing. So I would have cool over Reckles in that case, and I guess I got he kind of responded in kind and rewarded me with a nice little correct prediction there, I guess, for OMG. But I guess it just came out of like someone had to come out of the group in second place, I guess, and it happened to be OMG in that regard. So
So if we had to pick one of them,
if we had to pick one of them, it would have been OMG.
we don't want to pick any of them.
No, I mean, it's hard. It's easy for people to, and I think Thorn did actually like a really good job, detailing this point on the daily breakdown when he went into it, building like context behind players. And Drexxin, you also emphasize this very well in the fact that people don't care. They won't care enough to go and check back in like LPL. But people, I think it's so important to talk about like the context that we're making these choices and these calls on these teams from like a larger picture. Like OMG, for again, it cannot be emphasized more. Like for when they were at their high point, I think OMG was one of the best teams in the world. Their Braum jungle Thresh support composition. I mean, come on, what other team would play that with as much style and flash as they did?
I liked them in All Stars. Actually, they were still very good at that point too. So, like that was the team
So
that
that
won
wasn't
L.
OMG. No, I'm just messing with you because it was Xiong instead of Cool and Pomelo instead of Lovely and Alan instead
there's
of
just
Cloud.
so many. That's what kind of confuses me. Like I don't understand how a team like could just make so many roster changes despite that kind of continued success. It's really interesting to me to see how they can respond to just sudden changes. Like, for example, like they're going to go into this, they're going to go into the quarterfinals replacing Dada with Cloud, but I guess at this point, like, you replace Dada with anybody.
I think maybe they're kind of cocky about the success they've had with some of their roster changes, so they're like, yeah, we can just throw Dada in there; it'll be just as good.
It can't be any worse, right?
No, I'm talking about the initial decision to put Dada in.
Oh.
It's just like, oh, we're good when we make role swaps, roster swaps. We're totally fine with Dada here.
Is there anything else that you guys want to cover about the EDG Starhorn Royal Club?
I want to talk about
Corn.
We can talk about Corn. I want to talk more about my feeling of Edward Gaming when they play well as a better team versus Starhorn Royal Club when they play well as a bunch of really skilled players who just kind of are good at like in tandem going. It's like if you take a bunch of really mechanically skilled players and they by some chance get queued into the same solo queue game over and over again, you're going to develop like some kind of synergy. Versus whereas I think Edward Gaming is actually a really interesting team who have perfected the style that relies a lot on everyone being on point, on the communication being very good, on not leaving these openings. And we didn't see that at all. And it's kind of sad, but that's my feeling on Edward Gaming versus Starhorn. So
I want to segue this a little bit. I had lost my point. It just came back to me. And I forget how we were talking about. I think it's some sort of like pressure. Let's just throw this back to like Uzi like having his meltdown there on the stage. I want to talk about Chinese fans, and I want to talk about the pressure that particularly EDG is going under. Because I feel like there could be a factor here. And we've talked about this many times before. Like the Chinese fans are ruthless, just like absolutely devastating, especially to a team like EDG, which is unfortunate because, and I see why LoL Esports and Riot won't really cover EDG's like actual narrative and storyline. They keep calling them, like the super team, like the Alliance, without really going back into it because it's, it's not really their Riot happy
The
persona.
team that decided to come together magically.
The team that magically came to. Okay,
They're
so
the cradle robbers, aren't they? Like
yes,
they just kind of.
Thank
Yeah.
you. The quick and dirty of this is that EDG is perhaps the most hated League of Legends team in the world.
Or they were at one point.
Yes, they're called the traitors, the betrayers. They took half of World Elite, Clear Love, and FCZF as well as the coach. They caused this huge controversy. They got death threats.
PE too.
Just a lot of shit, a lot of smearing. They're not very well liked at all. And there's a lot of criticism right now for Clear Love and FCZF to retire because they're an embarrassment, because they're not performing well. I'm sure Name is getting a lot of hate.
Yeah,
and,
Name. Name and Clear Love mostly.
So you have to think about this. So Name is sick. He's hospitalized twice before he plays in the group stage, which even if you're gonna be like, oh, that's no excuse, people play, when they're not feeling, like, just count that the time that he was hospitalized was time that he lost to practice. You have the fact that they're playing in Taiwan, so if you don't know anything about politics or
Taiwan
just social
China.
relations, I guess, yeah.
That's a good social relations between countries. China and Taiwan don't really get along, so the Chinese teams were not well received there at all. And then the fact that they then cock block AHQ from making it out, like, on home turf, like, and then their fans from back home are pretty much telling them how shit they are and how they need to retire. Name was like, all of these factors coming together. Like, I don't want to build an excuse for EDG, but they were very clear. Like, if a team was going to trip up on something emotionally, I mean, do you think that there was a storm there for EDG, and do you think that they fell into it?
To an extent, but I feel like this is just this constant pressure barrage that they've had, and everything that they've experienced up to this point is probably nothing is as bad as what they were getting in the spring, I don't think. Like, in the spring, they weren't allowed to stream because they didn't want to interact with the fans at all, and they didn't want to do anything from that perspective. In the spring, there were very few news organizations that would even do interviews or anything with those players. So, and then, a World Elite graphic artist famously said that she publicly on her Weibo that she wished Clear Love would get hit by a car, right? So, and then the World Elite interviewer one of the interviewers for LPL who happened to be Wei Xiao's girlfriend at the time always used to spin this story whenever she did an interview with a World Elite member post game. I was like, you guys are doing much better because Raw and
Conan.
Raw and Conan are much better than Clear Love and FCZF, right? So just these, it was really weird. I don't think that the hate that they've received can really match the hate that they got then at all. It might to an extent, but so if you compare that, so you can almost make an argument that there's only so much a player can take, right? But at the same time, I don't know.
Do you think there's any team, in just the entirety of League of Legends, like, who do you think has had the most criticism thrown at them?
I don't know.
Or harshest
I
criticism.
can't say that.
Of all League of Legends teams?
Do you think there's an argument to be made that EDG is possibly that team?
EDG or World Elite before the whole EDG thing, just by sheer population of fans.
Sheer volume.
I mean, if you have that huge volume of fans, then, I mean, even if, 40% of those are superly overly critical, then that's pretty much, trumps anything we've seen in the West.
I think, I guess initially, just kind of the hype building up, I think Alliance kind of fell into that camp when there was that whole stirrings of them trying to make that super team, but that kind of died out really quickly when their initial plans kind of fell through. But regardless of that, they still played really well in the EULCS. So I think they kind of just proved their doubters after, that initial plan to make that really big super team, but they still played well regardless. So I think they kind of went along their own little way, but I'd probably go so far as to say, just listening to those stories, to these stories about EDG, in a way, like, their relationship to the rest of League of Legends, especially in regards to how they are covered by LOL Esports, it actually kind of reminds me of that relationship of the weird coverage that the Miami Heat got initially by ESPN when they picked up that super that trio of LeBron, Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh initially. Like, there's a lot of backlash against that from the fans as well, but not on this level though, because one, this is in China, and that's pretty much like the hugest player base, I guess, installed player base in the world. Like, that's pretty much my impression right now. And you get that really huge population, and you get a hated team like EDG. That, I think, that earns them that title of most hated in all of League of Legends, I guess.
How many players have we had like have to bow out from playing because the criticism? Like, you have TSM as a team completely bans themselves from social media. You have CLG's top laners.
Yeah, like Nien once.
Exactly. Like,
that was like one example of someone that was so bad that they had to just drop out, unless I'm missing people. But
yeah, that seems to be like a drop in the pond compared to what EDG's had to go through, just because of the size of the fan base. You think that the Western fandom and all their hatred towards, like, or just overreaction and circle jerking towards what TSM's going through, what CLG has gone through, and all that stuff, like, that's pretty small in terms of viewership compared to what you see in China over there. Like, just extrapolating numbers, like, just how many people just watch China alone, and then you just get the percentage of people who would be like overly critical, like that vocal minority. But because you kind of scale that to China's population, you got a really, really large vocal minority just screaming for players' heads over on that side of the scene. So it's hard for me to kind of fathom what those players are going through and the pressure that they're facing.
I think we'll cap it right here for a quick break, and when we come back, we'll start into the OMG versus Najin White Shield. And I know that we have a couple of graphs and some statistics that we want to crunch and run by, but we will cut here for break. And we're back. This is not the Daily Breakdown. This is China Talk. I'm your host, Froskurinn. Again, with me Kelsey Moser from On Gamers, Drexxin from Esports Heaven, Kriz from GG Chronicles, also going to be our Korean expert, which he finally gets to talk about, Korea, because we now are going to break down tomorrow's matchup. Or I guess maybe, no, it is tomorrow because it's different times. OMG, it's Monday? Yeah, it's Monday.
It's Monday.
Yep.
Officially.
Yeah, OMG
It's
versus Najin White Shield. So first and foremost, before we get to lovely graphics, I want you guys to really just go and he's laughing, to break down individually like where the strong points of both of these teams are. And I'm going to start with Kriz first, and I want you to break down what does Najin White Shield do? Like, give me general their play style, and then break it down lane by lane, starting LCS order, so top, jungle, mid, AD carry, and support. Like, what does each player role fill? What are their strengths?
Okay, so I guess even just before that, I just maybe highlight a little bit of context of why Najin White Shield is here to
Why
begin
are they
with.
here?
Like,
How did they
like
get
normally,
here? I've never heard of them.
No, because if just based on a lot of the other previous huge events, you'd think that like a casual observer who just like listened in and like about news regarding champions and the results from Champion Summer, one would initially think that, oh, maybe SKTK would be there, or KT Rollstar Arrows, who originally won Champion Summer, the most recent Champions winner, and I guess a lot of people are still wondering, like, why isn't Faker in the Season 4 World Championship? But basically, here's why.
Where's Tabe, too? I mean,
where's Tabe? Yeah, exactly.
Where's Tabe and Faker? What is
Tabe's
this?
on that team, right?
Yeah, Tabe, the one, like, he's the support Annie who played with Faker. Okay. Well, essentially, SKTK kind of just fell off this year. Like, after their dominating run through Champions Winter, they just kind of disappeared. Essentially, Pumandu, their support, he kind of took a leave of absence because of what was reported as like kind of like a personal illness. But then ever since he returned during, I believe, the end of group stages of Champions Spring, the team just wasn't the same ever since. And it's kind of been the Faker show and him trying to carry 1v9, and that carried well into the regional championships. As for KT Arrows, they're just an up and coming team that based, centered around Kakao. He's like the emotional leader of that team, and he's just practicing out of his mind, and their efforts paid off dividends, and they won Champion Summer. So they kind of snuck into that end of the year regional gauntlet thing that they've been doing, and KT Bullets, they kind of just blew up their roster despite the fact that they still had enough circuit points to qualify for that gauntlet. So a lot of things were just hitting perfectly for Shield to make their run. They've always been like a solid team. Just they were originally built around Save and Goon, kind of like their star solo laners, and they kind of with their older jungler, Nofe, they developed this really nice sense of strategical play, and then the whole reputed the use of Winions and really good wave management to provide extra pressure around the map and kind of force other teams to make mistakes. That's kind of their signature style, and they use really good team fighting to force really awkward engages for other teams, or just force team fights in general, based on those weird movements that those minions create. But Nofe retired, and then they replaced him with Watch, who is kind of more of like a playmaking jungler. And at that point, Shield had already developed that kind of sense of strategical play, so that they needed someone who can really help them, or at least reputedly be able to help them with the laning phase and provide extra pressure on the map. So if you want, we can just go over from top to bottom. So top, we have Save, who is essentially kind of pretty much the last of the top lane carries in the tradition of Mac Noon from the old Najin sword there. He is basically a really skilled laner. He can make plays both in the mid game as well as in lane. Like compared to other really talented top laners like Flame and all that, he can stand toe to toe with them and even beat them. He pretty much crushed him in the, I believe, in the playoffs of Champions Spring en route to their, I guess, Champions final against Samsung Blue. But he's known a lot as kind of like I won't say patch player, because he was really showing a lot of strength on his Shyvana and Renekton and all that. But eventually the metagame towards the end of Champion Spring shifted towards kind of like Lulu and the jungle follow 4v0. So it was kind of avoiding that straight up 1-on-1 top lane matchup, and that's where Save usually shone. But because they were kind of foregoing that, it was kind of difficult for Save to kind of adapt and try to make plays based on the limited resource he'd get during their laning phase. So while that metagame was going on, he wasn't able to affect this team. So the team overall kind of suffered. But now it's gone back to like kind of more standard lanes, and the champion pool opened up considerably. So now he gets to play all these like AP carry mages like Ryze, Kassadin, and all that stuff. So that's pretty much what he's going to be banking on coming into the quarterfinals. Watch, he's been kind of just I guess, the veteran presence on the group, added after Nofe got dropped. And he essentially acts as kind of like a playmaking jungler as per his reputation, but he's kind of one of those players who I guess either shows up or doesn't. And he like he has a fairly solid Lee Sin, but basically his play during the Gauntlet regionals, I guess he just played out of his mind and single-handedly carried his team up against SKTK. That was pretty much the regional finals right there. So Goong in the mid lane, he is a former Brood War player, and he has a fair bit of, I guess, professional experience, I guess, with regards to professional esports. But he's mechanically gifted, but his main, I guess, feature is he just works really hard. He doesn't have like a really good champion pool per se. It's pretty limited, but what he tries to do is he just tries to be really good at like a specific number of champions that are strong in the meta. So when he kind of rose along with Najin White Shield, he was really good on LeBlanc and Nidalee. But then, as it turns out, Nidalee got reworked completely, and then LeBlanc got nerfed, and all of a sudden he was left without any champions to play. Like he tried to fall back on Orianna, tried to fall back on Ziggs. They weren't really doing too well with him, and then that was like combined with the fact that Save wasn't doing well either. So actually during Champion Summer, the team actually played fairly poorly by their own standards. So it was just them getting hot right at the end of that season. And the regional qualifier pretty much was on a new patch that pretty much opened up a lot of new champions for them to play. Like Goong ended up playing a lot of Ahri, played a lot of Zed, and that pretty much made him look like an absolute superstar. So, and then you pretty much see him play a lot of that in the Worlds right now. So Zephyr at the AD carry position, he's kind of like a safe laner. Like a lot of the flack that he gets is kind of like he doesn't really provide a lot of presence in team fights and whatnot. He's just kind of there to just not fuck up, so to speak. And basically, he was originally brought on, also a newcomer, with the formation of that team, but he kind of played like a really conservative farming style initially, and he kind of rode the wave with the rest of the team, and kind of made sure that he didn't like feed or anything, which for the most part he was fairly good at. as long as Zephyr didn't feed, then they were good to go for like the late game and whatnot. So, and it's pretty much, and basically he has a really good champion pool, plays Twitch, Lucian, Kag'Ma, pretty much anybody who's pretty strong right now. So you can't really ban him out. So all he has to do is just play safely, and that's pretty much what the other teams tend to try to pick on during the laning phase. But it's very difficult because of his support, Gorilla. Gorilla, he specializes mostly in ranged champions like Nami, Sona. Like he has a pocket Sona that he'll bust out once in a while. But his Thresh is probably the most well-known champion, at least in regards to like how he's been playing at Worlds so far. He also played a lot of Janna actually during the end of summer and into that regional gauntlet. And I think it was because of his Janna play that kind of popularized. I'm not sure if it popularized it, but that was pretty much the first time I've ever seen Janna played in like a competitive level, and Gorilla played him a lot, and it had a lot of excuse me, had a lot of synergy with the Zed and Lucian picks that Zephyr and Goong were playing during that time. So that's pretty much it for that lineup right there.
Okay, so that is the Najin White Shield condensed version. Now,
Sorry, I'm sorry if I
you're
went
totally
too
fine.
long with it. So.
No, that's exactly what I
good.
asked for. Drexxin, Kelsey, now assemble me OMG. And let's see if we notice anything.
They were formed some years ago.
With 4 years ago.
With a team that originally, so the original OMG roster only had one member of it that is still consistent, and that's Going, actually.
Just skip their storyline.
Okay.
Give me
Well,
the player.
I know.
We care about 2012 OMG.
No, I am going all the way back there because I think it's significant that
2 years ago.
I think it's significant that the two, like the initial players that were formed from it had Cool and Going. So now that I know that I know that Najin White Shield was formed around these solo laners, it's interesting to me that OMG is like also formed around their solo laners.
It was
OMG runs on the power of friendship. Everyone on that roster has played together.
The power
since
of
before
friendship.
League of Legends. Like honestly.
No, Cool and Loveling like met each other in like a net cafe, and they've just been friends. And they used to play this old MOBA together, and they're just like these really good players. And people make jokes about them being gay, and you know whatever. But they're really good friends. We'll give it with that. There's also Going, who is the top laner, who is really strong. He's the main shot caller and the captain of the team. Cool, typically you hear people talk about Cool because he can almost play anything. And I used to be able to say he can play anything, but then there's this champion that Riot Games decided to make called Yasuo. And Cool's like very
that key champion that
that really
champion?
that really important champion that apparently LOL Esports thinks is his signature champion.
One that he's played 2 games on.
He's probably been playing against EDG and Starhorn with it for years.
Oh yes, I'm sure. He played 2 games on it really, really poorly, and then it kind of went dark and we never saw it again, and he played like repeatedly in solo queue against Faker and stuff, and he was like, I'm gonna be a really good Yasuo player. Comes out, and the first time we've seen it in forever, 21-8 against Starhorn Royal Club in the playoffs, right? So now it's his signature champion. We see it again for the next time in regionals. It's not that great. It's like not bad, but it's just meh. And we see it in groups, and it's pretty bad. Like,
to be fair, though, his only proc on his ultimate was Dada 7 on Dami.
I mean, it's pretty bad.
Like, I'm just gonna like, I like as soon as I saw that they didn't get Lee Sin, they did not, because normally when they run it with Lee Sin Yasuo, obviously, because you're gonna get the power spike, the Dragon Rage with the Yasuo ultimate. No, when he ran it in Worlds, his only ultimate proc was off of Dada 7. Let's just, I'm not even gonna blame him for that one. Continue. So
anyway,
Cool.
He can play pretty much anything. And he's been really, really good. Like, obviously, last year...
Would you say he's a very strong mechanical player?
I think he's actually one of the most cerebral players in China as well.
You're not going to give him any mechanics at all?
No.
Even though he's pretty much like the mini Faker of China.
He used to be the Faker of China, okay?
I said mini.
But then...
Faker's also a cerebral player.
Yeah, he's a cerebral mechanic player.
That's the thing.
So I guess he's like the rookie.
He's
China,
like the beautiful hybrid of both.
But he used to be like really, really strong, and last Worlds, obviously they played the same matchup in reverse. Like I think Faker and Cool played Orianna and Syndra matchup, and then
it was Gragas and Ori.
No, it was Gragas and Ori, and then the other one was Syndra versus Ori. Or no, Syndra versus, yeah.
Yeah, Syndra versus Ori.
Syndra versus Ori, and then in the match, when the matchup was in Cool's favor, he got solo kills on Faker, and when the matchup was in Faker's favor, he got solo kills on Cool, so that's the thing that everyone clings to, and they're like, yeah, Cool's a god, but it's one game. And obviously Cool is a very good player, and he's always really, really stood out in China as like a really solid, really, really strong mid laner, and he is miles ahead of Shi Young, who was the last mid laner that we saw, but he hasn't really, this Worlds, I think he's gotten the same criticism. Like he and Name were definitely the most hyped players from China going into Worlds, right? They both sort of been meh from the outsider's perspective, but I still think Cool is like ramping up because Cool needs ramp up time. Anyway, Cool, Going is...
You're talking about Going, Loveling.
No. OMG is not a mid lane only team. Going is like really strong, and he can carry the team also. Loveling, the jungler, his thing that I always used to like, this is when I fell in love with OMG as like, and probably the entire Chinese region, is when I used to watch, well, that's not fair because World Elite, but
Explain to me your
Loveling
love of
likes to
Loveling.
go. Loveling, when he plays his best, he goes into the enemy jungler. He puts wards, like deep wards, into the jungle, and then he comes in later and he just like solo kills the jungler over and over again when he's doing really well. And he can do this on the top side of the map because his solo laners are so strong. He hasn't been doing this as much lately, but it was kind of what won them the best of fives against Starhorn Royal Club, is just because how badly he could like just destroy Insec kind of from within. But that's Loveling will also snowball out of top, and then by ganking repeatedly and then going, we'll kind of do this top down where he teleports, he roams mid, and I hear this is like also a save thing. And then the bottom lane we have San, who is the Zifa style AD carry, except I think that he's really good on Kog'Maw, strangely. Where he's like really bad in lane, and he doesn't just farm, but he needs to have his hand held. He can look really good if he has a really good support. Like
He's
people,
bad in lane, but he doesn't feed.
yeah, he's bad in lane, but he doesn't feed. And then during
yeah.
and during team fights, he can be really good. Like he's recently had like a 20+ KDA Kog'Maw game.
Okay.
No, it was good. Okay.
No, I'm not gonna. I wasn't gonna. I'm just gonna condense
You're gonna
this.
cut me off.
The only point that I'm trying to make here, and this long contrived because I wanted to set up the back orders with the teams, is that OMG and Najin White Shield, if you go down the list, they're very similar. They have very, in the context of the strengths of their team, the AD carry is probably arguably the weakest position for them. Not saying that Zephyr and Son are shit, just saying that they're the weakest links of their teams. They have supports that are well-known Thresh players, now that Cloud is going to be subbing in, which we'll talk about Cloud in a little bit. They have junglers who are inconsistent, who can, I guess, appear to be amazing, although I think Loveling's a bit more consistent than Watch, but that said, I don't really have a good context with Watch, because everyone just says that, Watch doesn't show up, and then suddenly he does, whereas Loveling is, pretty consistent. Mechanically skilled mid laners, and then hyper carry top laners. So across the board, these teams are pretty much perfect mirror images of each other. So tell me, why will Najin White Shield win, and why will OMG win or not win? Like, tell me, like, if they're where is these differences coming from that it like stacks up?
I'd say it's the Winions. Yeah.
The Winions?
Well,
who uses Winions better than OMG? Have you met their base?
Well, I mean, like the thing is, like, I feel like in most positions, like
OMG is not afraid of your Winions.
Shield comes out slightly ahead, and I will stick to staying slightly, because I like judging just by performances I've seen at Worlds. Judging by performances I've seen at Worlds, I don't think Save is any hasn't shown to be significantly better than Going. I'd argue Going's rise has been more impactful, but different opponents, whatever. Another thing is just like Shield has obviously had better practice partners throughout the season, so that's a thing. They're probably better in best of fives just because Korean infrastructure, and then to top it all off, like, I don't think they have the same emotional issues as OMG, which I think is like the biggest deal.
If there's someone who you'd probably need to watch out for from in terms of like an emotional standpoint, it would probably be Save, because it seems like he doesn't respond particularly well to being camped. A lot of the game plans that are set up against Shield usually involve camping the top lane, because you can sort of bet that the bottom lane is not going to make too much of an impact. They're kind of just there to just be present and not have fed the other enemy leading into the mid and late game. So it kind of allows the top lane to be like open season for your jungler to try to repeatedly gank Save. And if he's on a champion that's very difficult in a dive 2v1 situation, like if he's on a Rise or something like that, he's very prone to actually falling behind considerably. Like a lot of the times when he has really poor games, I notice that it's because he's on rise and whatnot. But I remember this one time, I'm not sure how far back it was. I think it was either in Champion Spring or Summer. I think it was their series against Blaze where they kind of went they went the distance and stuff. They basically had this really bad game for save, and he was just kind of like freaking out. And I think it was Watch or the coach or someone, and they're just kind of like they were trying to talk him down. It's like, Save, it's okay, don't worry. We'll just put you on Shyvana, okay? Everything's gonna be fine. And Shyvana being like his signature champion at the time, and they pretty much tried to appease him, tried to talk him down from like a ledge just by telling him, okay, you're gonna go on Shyvana, we're gonna pick you, we're gonna base our team around you, and you're gonna do great. And then he just responds pretty well at that point, but. Save, you kind of have to watch out for him, I guess, and if you're looking for like a tilt alert, because it seems like the theme of this year's Worlds is put him on tilt and you got the game, right?
So just tilt them.
Just tilt
them.
Hashtag just tilt them. So if you want to tilt someone on Shield, it's going to be Save. But
okay, so here's my next thing.
I want to say my point where Shield is better is picks and bans, even though Shield they both have really weird.
They have really weird picks and bans.
They both have really weird red side picks and bans, but OMG is like, we're just gonna first pick Jax. It's okay. They're just doing it because they're against Starhorn.
No, okay. So I'm glad that you brought that up because I was just gonna ask, like, is the win condition for Najin White Shield, is it only in their ability to manipulate map pressure and waves? Because and I'm gonna actually use the fact that I know nothing about White Shield here. Mm-hmm. From a bystander who knows nothing about White Shield, I think I've maybe seen a total of 9 of their games, most of them including what they've played in Worlds. So just total, like, I have yet to see these winions. I have never seen White Shield use these supposed winions to win a game, which, again, people can say, people will bring up the context of, but this is how they performed in regionals and this is their strategy, building that larger context. But teams like EDG who... everyone said Starhorn World Cup's going to win. Why? Because they're performing at Worlds. Well, can't the same logic now be applied to Najin White Shield? I haven't seen Watch really impress me, and I haven't seen any winions. And now that we've kind of broken down the teams, they seem to be even across the board. So where else does Najin White Shield have a difference, or are they just going to be, am I going to see it? Are the winions coming? Is my base under attack?
The winions actually,
the winions are coming.
That particular, I guess that reputation that they built for themselves, I guess it stems from their play back in Champion Spring, essentially, because that was back when they weren't able to kind of branch out of their late game team fight oriented type of strategy that they use. So that Winion kind of meme or moniker that they got was, I think it was born in this one game that they had against, I believe it was Zenix Storm in group stages of Champion Spring. And basically it was, I think the game lasted almost an hour, and numerous times, I think Save was on, I believe, Lee Sin top, and he just kept going down to the bottom lane and just not pressuring waves, but he just kind of slow push or just cleared waves so that the wave would just kind of push really, really hard into Xenix's base. And this was back in the time when LeBlanc was really popular and whatnot. So they'd had this really weird siege that they would set up with like a lot of mechanical play, like trying to zone out with spell rotations from LeBlanc by Gung. And actually, it's kind of funny because this particular game, they kind of shot themselves in the foot in picks and bans, which lends to their reputation right now. So they were actually forced onto a pocket Sona pick. And while she's okay in I guess because she's a ranged support champion, they made them kind of okay in siege situations, but it was mostly for like I guess disengage or whatnot. I actually don't even know why they ended up picking Sona for that, but they played that team comp incredibly well. This was during the time when Pantheon jungle was really strong as well, so Xenix had that Pantheon pick, and it was very difficult to kind of siege towers when you have an enemy Pantheon like threatening to jump on you from behind. But regardless how many times that they tried to do that, they managed to just kite you away and then just have like this perfect crescendo and have a perfect team fight to follow up. And that's pretty much how they won that game. And it kind of moved on, and then it kind of built from there. And they had like one or two more like these hour-long games where the super minions would knock on the Nexus turrets of the enemy base. But over the course of time, I guess, like from summer onwards, they were trying to adapt and try to branch out their style so they wouldn't be so late game oriented. So right now, when you're talking about, you're not seeing a lot of minion waves, like they're still really good at pushing waves and wave control, but it's just not in like that exaggerated form of super minions like trying to kill you. Yeah, exactly. So it's not really the minions per se, but they're really good at pushing waves. I think I was watching I think it was that tiebreaker against Cloud9, and they had this really, really nice push in the mid lane, and there were two really, really strong waves coming from the top and bottom. And I think they actually got a free turret out of the bottom wave push as well. So that's kind of like something that they do have in their pocket that they're able to do really well.
Was this a different game where High like backdoors their base and it was almost a base race and Najin White Shield almost lost to map pressure from a North America team when talent was like 1-9?
It's funny because I think it was that the game that they ended up winning, or that Cloud9 eventually actually won against them. I think High was just kind of relegated to split push status in the top lane. So pretty much it's not any different. So because of the fact that they're really good at pushing the waves deep into their enemy's base or into the enemy side of the map, High can't really just kind of sneak in there because he's just kind of instead he's actually just forced to push. So he's just pretty much a split pusher at that point of the game. But they eventually lost. It was like a really good team fight by Balls, and that pretty much sold the
Thank you. See, yeah, I'm sorry. I set you up on a trap here to now like hit you with like this next question. So
yeah, sure.
The other reputation that people keep telling me, and by people I mean Anne Prague, looking at you, is that Najin White Shield likes to go late. They like to win late. And the thing that just looking at it from a meta standpoint, late game, if you go to like 50 minutes late game, which is that where Najin typically kind of what's the joke that the game, if Najin White Shield's in a game, that it's going to be like a 45-minute game because Najin's going to like piss around and then decide that they want to do something?
Well, based on the games that they've shown at Worlds, it's kind of weird because of the way their team comps have evolved over time. Whenever they shoot themselves in the foot now, they just kind of bend over and die and like, or the roll over and die. Like I remember their one loss during the regional qualifier against SKT. I don't even remember what they picked in that composition, but they just didn't show up at all, and then they just didn't know what to do with their composition. They just flat out lost to SKT, and they just SKT just kind of took the advantage and just snowballed it from there. And I think that's pretty much what happened with their game against Alliance as well. They it wasn't so much about the composition that they built for themselves, but just kind of the team that they allowed their opponents to make. Like they gave Wicked Aurelia, they gave Shook Lee Sin, and then for themselves, they only had like Gung on Orianna, which isn't necessarily his best champion. Like it's one of his fallbacks, but I'm not even sure why he picked that in general as well. Like they lost some picks and bans in that case. But
the overarching point that I'm trying to make or trying to allude to here, because obviously there haven't been a lot of super long games in World so far. I think relatively most of them have been kind of snowballs or 20-minute like shutdowns.
I think C9 was like the only one that went fairly long, so it was just kind of like I guess if you're a bystander, you just kind of have to go to that.
And again, like most of the reasoning that I'm getting from people that tell me that Najin White Shield is going to just absolutely destroy any Chinese, like let's not even think OMG, but like any Chinese, Star Home Royal Club, OMG now are kind of the two Chinese teams that they have to go through, is that, they play map pressure really well and, or they'll play to late. And the thing is what I'm saying is I haven't seen the map pressure really. I've seen it used against them as well. And you did bring up that one instance, but if they play to a late game, because of how the meta is right now for me, like if you ever play to a late game with a Chinese team, OMG and Star World Cup specifically, that's going to come down to a team fight to me. And late game, Like, that's pretty much one team fight those death timers are going to be punishing, and that's going to be the game. That's pretty much what happened in the Fnatic OMG games, you know, when, like, the base and everything was just, like, crazy.
Yeah.
It just came... And so this is my thing. Like, people are so definite. They're not even going to give a Chinese team a shot. It's going to be a Korean final. You know, there's no way. But from all the play style and everything that people keep telling me, I'm like, but don't you think at like 56 minutes, or let's say like 46 minutes, Star Horicum versus Najin White Shield, a team fight could go, I'm going to flip a coin on that one, because both regions that's a 50-50. But people are saying, no, it's 20-80, Korean team's going to take it. And yes, I agree, you know, the picks, the bans, the adaptation of Korean teams, the infrastructure is so much better. But in the current meta, why is it that no one will ever even dance with the thought that we could see a Chinese team in the finals?
I'd say that they've managed to diversify their strengths in terms of like the way they go about their win conditions. They've become actually very
adaptability.
Yeah, like they've actually branched away. Not branched away. I mean, they'll still have that ability to team fight in the late game when they need to. Like that's kind of like their fallback. But they've managed to they managed to branch into other ways of winning as well. Like one of their popular team compositions right now is Lucian Janna. And Zephyr would build Bloodthirster on Lucian.
With the shield.
Yeah, and basically they just siege super hard, and that's pretty much goes against their very definition of that whole late game thing. And when you have Goong on Zed making like picks with their really good vision control, like if there's one thing that Shield does really well, it's that vision control, and Gorilla is a huge component of that. And basically when they set that up with in combination with their push, like they can do a lot of damage in terms of like taking towers and setting up dragon control and all that jazz. So it's just a matter of trying to figure out how to get around their power spike. And a lot of the thing, like what they do is that they supplement their mid-game siege with late-game top carries. So like Save will be there to perform if he needs to.
You mean like playing Lucian Corki all the time and then having a Rise in the top lane?
Yeah, like that's pretty much what you're gonna see. I think like and I think I like what as you wrote for your Kelsey wrote on Gamers like that article about Shield going up against all the different Chinese teams. If they go up against OMG, I can definitely see a contested pick being the Rise. Like you already saw that between Royal Club and EDG this particular game. Like there's a lot of Rise first picks as well. So I don't see anything being any different. But then if they do fight for that Rise first pick, then that just frees up a lot of options for Goong to play. So if it becomes a pick and ban to fight for I guess contest for a good top lane pick for either the two teams, it's going to fall on Goong actually to perform. And that's pretty much the matchup that I'm actually most interested in, him going up against Cool here.
Okay, Drexxin. Chris finally came down. He said adaptability, picks and bans. That's why Najin White Shield's going to win. Like when it all boiled down to it, the matchup is going to be Goon versus Cool. If we're going to talk about adaptability and we're going to talk about a Chinese team, who is the most creative Chinese team? Which one do you think has the most play styles, has the most compositions available to them?
Jungle Lucian.
Statistically cool. I mean, yeah.
You mean it's OMG?
OMG.
The
I don't know
team
why I said
that they're
cool.
gonna be
This is what happens when you stay up till late in the morning. But yeah, statistically OMG. I mean, they ran Braum jungle with Thresh support. Okay, like that's creative. Like,
so how is Najin White Shield gonna out adapt a team who made Braum jungle Thresh support work? Like, this is what everyone keeps telling me these things, but I just keep saying back to them. Well, tell me, what is it? Kelsey, give me, like...
Well, creating a strategy and executing it are different.
It's different.
There are a couple of things. First of all, OMG's compositions...
I try to slow pitch this, and everyone just, like, letting the ball hit them in the face.
No. First of all of OMG's compositions, like, the Braum jungle Thresh thing was the last time I think we saw something really, really creative and something really, really, that just clicked and made all this sense. I guess like also against the World Elite, like building up to week 7, but then their picks and bans have been really weird. And I think their coach TT, like we hammer on TT, but if you look at Invictus Gaming,
he's ruined 2 teams, not just one.
Like Invictus Gaming used to be the team that TT coached, and that team's picks and bans are just like really bad. Like I don't. Oh my god.
It wasn't
So,
even that bad before IG's coach
but
came.
it's
Coach though.
well, yeah, and OMG used to have the
That's
best
so bad.
picks and bans.
Where
facing
is
China,
where is
right?
OMG going to mess
But-
up their pick ban against Najin? Like, give me like
I
give me
can't.
actual.
I can't tell you because they will just like first pick Rise or not first pick Rise, first pick Jax or something random. Like
You
that's.
honestly think that they will first?
I
pick
don't
Jackson
think they'll
too?
first pick Jax, but I think they'll do something really stupid. Yes.
But tell me, give
I
me.
can't because it'll be something as stupid as a first
She's
pick
getting like
Jax.
really strung out about this.
Like this is the thing. It'll be something as like random and
She'll be like,
nonsensical.
damn it, Heckara mid. I knew it.
Exactly. Like this is the shit I'm talking. Cool won't play the same champion in the same game like more than once.
It's gonna be the Yasuo pick.
For
That's
some
what it's gonna
reason.
be.
Yeah, that's what
Cloud's-
it's gonna be.
Cloud's
They're gonna just like
lock in
they're just gonna
Yasuo.
lock in the Yasuo. I don't understand.
Okay, but are you gonna give this on picks and bans, or do you think Najin White?
No, it's
Shield-
not just picks and bans though, because
She's getting really
I
upset.
do want to say that I
White
think
Shield. I'm getting mad because you keep like asking me questions and then interrupting me with like, no, what do you mean by this? I'm trying to answer the question.
I have like a stick, and I'm just like jabbing it into you.
But
Calm
I
down.
think
Reflect.
we watched the compositions that Najin White Shield can run, and they are very adaptable. Save has something over Go Going, even if Go Going has, I think, performed maybe a little bit more consistently in World so far, and that
Reflect
he
has been
can,
a stallion.
and
Go Going
that
is pretty good.
and that he can play a more versatile style. He can play like the AP Nidalee split push or the AP Nidalee poke type deal that we saw Blue try to execute against Cloud9. He can actually like play that well, and that's something Go Going will never try to do. And we saw OMG try to run like the split push composition right with the Zed, and I think did they ultimately win that game? It was just really out of like sheer snowball effect, but they lost, but it wasn't because of the split push. I can't remember if they won that game or not. I don't even remember which game it was, but they tried to run it with the Zed pick split pushing off to the side, and it just didn't work for them because, like, as we call them, the Bash brothers, Cool, Go Going, Loveling, they're better together, right? They just kind of like smash people
They skirmish.
in a unit. Yeah, they skirmish. They're like a Chinese team that skirmishes. It's really weird.
Which is why they won't split push, because they can't afford to give up one of their valuable resources across the map.
But
Which is why Son
and
gets cut out all by himself.
San will sometimes split push, but you don't
Right
want
before
your
he
AD
dies.
carry to split push, right? So, I think they'll split push less and they'll 5v5 more with Cloud. But I don't know how much time they have to make that adaptation, because when they had Cloud, they used to 5v5 much more, and much more effectively. But
Drexxin?
yeah, that's their natural inclination. Whereas Save has the versatility to do that, so they can run these split push and these poke and kite compositions that I think are really deadly against a team like OMG.
So she brings up specific compositions. I want you to talk about compositions of OMG. Do they have the versatility that Najin White Shield has in their compositions to run? And I want you to talk about Cloud, because we haven't really talked about him. Like, obviously, the consensus was Dada7's on the team, OMG, the dream dies here. Does that change with Cloud? And can you give us like a little bit, like background? Like, what can viewers expect from Cloud? What are we expecting from Cloud? Because he got a lot of hype, but, you know, coming into the world stage, this guy has, what, 0 international experience?
Yeah.
In a high-pressure situation with, has been benched for not, like, a few days, like weeks. This wasn't like a spin scare and, like, he was out for, you know, the first 3 games. This is, like, weeks has not been with the team.
The entire group stage, pretty much, yeah.
Has a reputation of being very toxic. Is also it was the issue that he was like shot calling for the team and going and a Loveling are the primary and secondary shot callers, and then to have like a third shot caller, and I guess there was argument and fighting in the team. Is your name Drexxin?
Oh, right.
Okay, so
Sit down.
first of all, I do think in terms of adaptability, both teams are similar, but I also think that OMG is very stubborn and trying to force things to work that they really should stop. Like for
engaging
instance,
with
Cool.
Dada7?
Like Nami with Dada 7, like cool with like Yasuo, just like okay, it didn't work. Like let's not try to pull it out again or whatever. But I mean, but yeah, the thing with Cloud is it's been such a long hiatus, and like if they did it throughout the groups, it'd be fine. I still think it's gonna be an upgrade no matter what. But like Cloud was one of those people that started out as a pretty good support for OMG, but like very quickly ascended. Like he was someone that accelerated his skill at a very rapid pace and was actually set on course to probably become one of the best supports up there with like Zero. But unfortunately, like it's hard to like tell fans to expect the peak he was at before he dropped down.
Yeah, you can't.
Because the momentum is no longer there, and he was a very rapidly climbing support, but we don't know how he handles Rust. And like as Kelsey mentioned, he lacks the international experience, which Dada at least can say he had for a few games, like game against TSM. Was it only one game at Worlds last year?
Game.
Yeah, it was the
Dada
game
has
against
been to
TSM.
Worlds twice. Just let that one sink in.
But yeah, I mean that's the thing. It seems so hasty, but like I can't really fault OMG because it ultimately is still the best choice. It just really sucks because I don't think we'll be seeing a Cloud that we saw in his peak right before he quit. It's going to be. I have to devalue him a bit and say it's going to be a lot worse than that. I don't want people to think that he's going to contest with Gorilla or something because I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and even like I think we kind of look at Cloud with rose-colored glasses a little bit because when they replaced him with Dada 7, it was a huge travesty, but it would be a travesty to replace Kiwi Kid with Dada 7. So,
Mean?
yeah, so that makes Cloud look just a little bit better also than he probably was, right? But he was, I want to state he was a really good Thresh player. Like, he was a really solid Thresh player. He got really good hooks that he probably shouldn't have been able to do. He used to play the roam game really well. Like, I talked about how the emphasis of Loveling in the top lane. And then Cloud actually liked to roam mid a lot when they used to do the 2v1 swaps. So it was an interesting way that worked out. How maybe he got benched because Loveling was jealous that Cool and Cloud were, getting synergizing better. I don't know. But that's a bad joke. Anyway, regardless, I almost felt like Loveling and Cloud had a really good synergy going where they kind of did this map control. And I've actually even seen Najin White Shield do this where they'll go into the jungle and they use that jungle control and they punish that jungler together. But yeah, he's not going to be like that. I don't think he's going to be like that. And when he played Alistar, his Alistar was awful. His Nami was pretty good and his Thresh was really good. But other than that, I didn't really ever see a champion that I thought he was like excellent on. So
he hooked Kassadin, Kelsey.
He hooked Kassadin.
How can you be mad about that? He predicted the Kassadin Riftwalk, hooked him, threw the lantern to Rengar, dove and killed Kassadin on tower post level 6, and just how are you just gonna like bow down?
That's what I'm saying though. Yeah. That's Cloud at peak performance, man. We're not gonna see that, which sucks. But
the other thing though is I feel like the big thing is that they can rely on him to get those types of skill shots a little bit more. And when you see the way OMG plays, they're very reliant on everyone hitting their shit to the extent that they just assume everyone's going to get their stuff and they're going to have this perfect thing, and then all this stuff goes in tandem, and if one person screws up, and that's also what allows them to be like the diving team. When you think of OMG, they're the diving team, and we haven't seen that play that in groups as much because Dada 7 would screw it up. Like that's so they couldn't do it. So they stalled it out. Like OMG doesn't understand minion waves to such an extent because they dive so much. I think that really is true. They just don't even care if the minions are there because they're just gonna go. And so because of that, we kind of saw them step back a little bit. We can't dive as much anymore, boys. We're going to stall out a lot more. So they almost looked a little bit more like EDG than Starhorn, just because they would get these early leads by being aggressive in lane and just like strong arming people, but then they wouldn't be able to carry out their style, which is like these tandem dives that pressured the advantage more. And so they would kind of have to wait to strangle out the jungle and strangle out the enemy team more. So if they play those dives and if they can play those dives with Cloud, I think we're going to see a very a much better and much faster OMG, but if not, then I think they'll play into Najin White Shield's hands very well.
So let's just break this down real quick. OMG will lose to Najin White Shield because Najin White Shield has superior adaptability in their team compositions, being able to play poke and split push. Najin White Shield, because they are Korean, they have better picks and bans phase. Did I miss anything?
Better adaptability. I wouldn't say initially better picks and bans phase. I would say that over time.
I think they're both likely to have 1 or 2 games on each side where they just kind of shoot themselves on the foot in picks and bans.
Yeah.
I still haven't gotten over that for White Shield. Like, they'll still have that, and they've shown it.
I'm sure OMG will give them a break multiple times.
Yeah.
I just want to say that there's a difference between like banning Gramus because you're not sure what it's going to do, and then like picking for lanes, and then, oh, we're just going to first pick Jax this game. It's not good. Okay.
They did it against Cola.
I know, but they also did it later against EDG once, and it was weird.
They won.
No, they didn't win. It was against EDG. Oh, okay.
But is that where we're going? Is there anything else? Picks, bans, adaptability, the fact that we cannot get a judge on where their 5th man is playing. Like, we have no idea where Cloud is going to show up.
I think a lot of, just from what I'm hearing right now about Cloud, if he does favor that 5v5 and is very, I guess he really prefers that sort of play style. I'm not sure how well he'll play within OMG's system, especially when it comes to vision control around Dragon. If they're going to use team fights to try to establish control around neutral objectives, then they need to be able to ward properly for those particular objectives. I mean, I saw some things from OMG where they kind of, I hope that they learned their lesson against LMQ. I think there was one particular match, I think, kind of late.
Before you continue with your warding, so we can, because we actually have the graphic for this one.
Okay,
so,
sure. You know what? Yeah.
Why you explain this? Because I think Najin White Shield is actually on the top of the warding chart. Mm-hmm. So we're going to put up on your screen the warding graphic.
This is just one metric that you can do. I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit because there are a bunch of different metrics, but while I was looking at these numbers and playing with them a little bit, I noticed that Najin White Shield has a really good vision denial game. They kill like 40% of, in World's group stage, they kill like 40% of their opponent's wards. So that's really big. That put them at the very top in that vision denial game, and that's, I don't know, like, it's hard to argue with something like that like any wards that OMG picks down, unless they have to be really, really creative and really, really spot on with their warding to prevent Najin White Shield from pretty much denying them their vision. So
yeah, I noticed a really interesting warding placement coming from LMQ during that last, I think it was the last game between them and OMG. I'm not sure which game it was, but essentially what happened, they put a ward down deep into the Baron pit, but then they placed 2 extra wards just outside of the lip on either side. And it was pretty much impossible for them to kind of eliminate them all. So they're going to have to be a little bit more thorough in being able to clear out the wards in that river. Like, they can't just pick out the standard spots, and they need to bring more pink wards to those objectives if they want to be able to sweep everything up.
And that was the other interesting thing. Like, we don't have it on this graphic, but Dada7 plays the 2nd most wards per minute.
He's a walking ward.
In group stage.
Like, he's got to be good for something, right? So,
right, obviously. So,
like, if there's anything that OMG would be able to use to their advantage there, is that they'll be able to at least use Dada7 to kind of like help them to provide vision. But it's just
they're
like,
not playing Dada7.
Yeah,
well,
like,
their vision control turns the shit, and that's how they lose.
So is that?
If only they had played
possibility,
Dada7.
That is that's a very real possibility because they like
one like Shield, he's been warding the best, right?
Vision is like, I think it's definitely something that you plan for, and it's something that you coordinate with your team. And if you are just a new, I won't say new player, but if you're just reintroducing yourself back into the lineup, I think that takes a little bit of an adjustment period in order to be able to coordinate who buys the wards, or, you know, who just kind of like the patterns of purchasing wards upon backs and all that other stuff. So kind of coordinating your backs and buying the wards when you actually need them. Like that's something that even like the top level teams still have problems doing. I remember I think in the grand finals of Champion Summer, the Arrows actually had a little bit of a problem trying to get that. Like they initially had kind of like a pretty good vision control around the Baron, but then they kind of backed a little too soon, or they didn't bring enough wards back to replace them, and then they just kind of eventually lost control of that particular part of the map. So it's something that you'll see even still at the highest levels of play. So you'll need to be at your A game with regards to vision if you want to beat Najin White Shield, because they're very strategically oriented around that map.
I think the other graphic that we have as far as like matching up players, and we should have brought this up sooner, is the percentage of damage done by role for teams. And I think kind of the most shocking thing for this, and why I think it's relevant to Najin White Shield and the OMG matchup in particular, is if you look at the difference between Loveling and pretty much every other jungler, and the fact that, in my opinion, I haven't seen the watch that people have, again, as a bystander that doesn't know anything about White Shield, I haven't seen this watch that people have been hyping up. And Loveling is obviously performing very, very well. And I think that shows right there in like kind of the statistics.
So to clarify exactly what you're looking at, the percentage of teams damaged to champions is what's listed. And what I think about OMG is their 4 main roles, their top, mid, jungle, and ADC, have probably the most even distribution of percentage of damage dealt to champions of any team that participated in group stage, because there's always like this significant drop off in the jungle role, and the ADC is far ahead, like you'll see on Royal Club and Samsung Blue in particular. The ADC will be really far ahead. But then also on the next column will be the relative to role average percent. So relative to his role, Loveling does 61% more damage than the average jungler in group stage. And that was the highest differential we had relative to role. So that's an interesting thing to point out, is that Loveling is doing significantly more damage to champions than any other jungler in the tournament, relative to the rest of his team. And when you think about how well Going performed, like how much damage he must have output in that Rise game when he didn't die, and how well, and obviously he also played Maokai, so that's diminished a little bit. And when you think about cool Zed performance on that assassin, it's not anything that's insignificant, I don't think, but of course, Watch is more of a Lee Sin player, and then so Loveling plays a lot of Lee Sin too. But
I mean,
stylistically, you think about that matchup, and I think that's a significant difference.
Again, we talked about how they're very similar teams. The instances in which Najin White Shield will win being about their versatility as a team. Now we've shown, statistics, the vision is a big thing in favor of Najin White Shield, but I think statistically so far as showing up for Worlds, Loveling has shown to be more of a factor than Watch. Is Watch that, is he the hinge on which Najin White Shield swings? Because they found victories, obviously, so far in Worlds without Watch having a really standout performance.
It's interesting. I find this metric rather interesting in terms of how damage is kind of used as a metric for player performance. Like obviously, damage isn't necessarily the only way that you can contribute to overall team success. I don't think Watch is that kind of player who contributes to his team just from damage. Like he'll build like Korean players, they like to do like the utility ganking junglers like Lee Sin and Elise. Like those two are like kind of like the big two in Korea right now, just because of the amount of vision control that they can provide, as well as just the way they can move around the map and set up really creative ganks. So it's mostly a matter of what they can do in the early game to create pressure on the map rather than what they can do in team fights. And team fights is pretty much where the majority of this damage is taking place. So you can pretty much use this metric as actually a way to show what kind of play style that those teams actually do. So maybe you're going to see Watch doing, and in fairness, like Watch, his relative roll to the average is actually it's only 5%. It's not that much of a deviation from the norm. So it's not like he's not going to be a non-factor or anything. He's just going to be pretty much there. And I think even then that's still a cause for concern, because the reason why Watch was definitely hyped up leading into Worlds was just simply how amazing his performance was. Like not like the jungler amazing, like he was on his own different level there. I mean, I'm not really a fan of amazing, but anyways, his play, like he did some really crazy plays on Lee Sin against SK Telecom to pretty much pull his team to victory. Like just really great Lee Sin kicks all around. Like if you're playing Lee Sin, you're not there for the damage. You're just there just to make a really good kick. Like his play, like his ceiling, I guess, is pretty much what Spirit does all the time with Lee Sin. Like Spirit is like I'd say is the best team fighting Lee Sin in the world. Watch, I'd say he's kind of like a weird like vanilla hybrid of both Dandy and Spirit. Like Dandy will have like really great lane pressure and make really great counter ganks and whatnot, but he doesn't do as well in team fighting situation as opposed to Spirit. Spirit's Lee Sin in the mid lane game is just amazing. And I'd probably go so far as to say that Watch is kind of like he's takes a little bit from both, but doesn't really stand out in either of the two. So it's just weird to see him like that. I think the hype came from the fact that he just played really well during the qualifying the Korea regionals. And for me, like despite the fact that I am a pretty big White Shield supporter, his play in Worlds he's been non-existent, and he needs to step up if he wants his team to actually win Worlds altogether. So, or let alone just get out of the first round.
So, yeah, I think that's a significant point. And I think for me, the reason why this statistic was so shocking is because I do think of Loveling more as that early pressure style jungler. Again, probably his most successful and his most picked champion was Lee Sin. He had like an 80% win rate on Lee Sin during the regular season. And he always made those early ganks with that champion. And I don't really think of him as like the super good team fighting jungler. And when I think of where he's aggressive and where he's most effective is when he makes those jungler invades and when he's like ganking top lane. So this type of switch of style is really interesting to me to see as well. So
I think one of the reasons why he ended up doing a lot of his team's damage in that case is simply because of the way the metagame shifted over to Kha'Zix.
Right.
Like Kha'Zix was a really huge pick, and like when you're playing an assassin jungler like that, like you're definitely going to be definitely doing a lot of damage, not just from team fighting, but just in terms of picking people off during the laning phase of the game. And I'm just going through a lot of these picks and bans here. Like out of the 6 games that OMG has played, he played Kha'Zix in 3 of them. And then on top of that, he also played Evelynn. And Evelynn just does a crap ton of damage on her own as well. So it's kind of like, I think that kind of champion selection would naturally skew in favor of having a high damage contribution towards the team. But
again, stylistically, he's like a Lee Sin and a Jarvan player, but he made this change going into Worlds, I think probably to compensate for some of the failings in the bottom lane.
Chinese teams don't adapt, Kelsey. They dive Nexus towers. Nothing changes.
So, and his
Chinese
Kha'Zix, and like again, I feel like he learns to play champions on the plane because like his Thresh during regular season and spring was really awful, and then he comes to All Stars and he's just like cooking everything.
Yeah.
And then his Kha'Zix and regionals, I don't know if you watched LPL regionals, but it was really bad. And then he comes to Worlds and it's like, oh, Kha'Zix, okay.
The only experience I've had watching OMG was basically their matches against Starhorn Royal Club. So I'm not sure if that's actually the best sample to draw from when it comes to evaluating it.
It depends on which games against Starhorn Royal Club, because in playoffs they had like those 3-2 games, but then in regionals they just got destroyed. So
until they got to LGD last game, and Cool was like, "Hold my beer, guys. Don't worry, I'll get us into Worlds.
I've got this. Yeah.
Then he played Ahri. Drexxin, is there anything else that you would want to talk about in the Najin White Shield OMG matchup?
Well, I did get reminded by Twitter that Shield has only dropped games on purple side and they get the pick preference, so that is also something to consider in the specifive. Otherwise, yeah, the thing is, like, the only other thing to talk about and elaborate a little bit more on that hasn't been touched up because you guys covered it pretty well was just that, well, I just feel like Watch at his peak is very good, but I feel like Loveling will hover more around, even if he hovers more around a mediocre performance, he'll probably outperform Watch. Other than that, like, not too much to add. I think you guys covered most of it. And like another thing is I guess one more thing is just I feel like I don't feel like Cloud making this resurgence will compete with Gorilla in terms of what he does for the team, because you have to consider the fact that like Watch doesn't help too much in the warning department, so Gorilla is insane with his map control, and I think that's going to be scary for OMG.
So now let's do percentage predictions. I'm gonna start with Kelsey, then go Drexxin, then we'll go Kriz. So Kelsey, percentage that Najin White Shield will win or lose versus OMG.
So when I wrote my article, I said 15% OMG takes the series, like that was my, and then 60% they'd take a game. I think with Cloud, it's gonna be like 35% OMG wins.
Okay. Drexxin?
And like probably around 70 to 80 they take a game. So
Drexxin?
Yeah, I'm gonna be safe here and say 35-80 as well, because that was what I originally was planning.
Kriz, if you don't say 100% for Najin White Shield, I'm gonna be upset. Come on, what? Give me your numbers.
I'm gonna go a little bit more into White Shield's favor. Just simply, I guess I'm not as familiar with what OMG is capable of as you guys are. I'd probably go so far as to say, consider. I'm just going back to that whole vision thing now. I'm a lot more convinced of Shield's ability to pull this through just from their strategical play. Strategic play. I mean, I'd probably go 80-20 here.
Okay.
All the way up, maybe as high up as maybe 85-15, I guess. But in terms of just taking a game, it's funny because in terms of taking a game, though, there's going to be a game where Shield just kind of shoots themselves in the foot. Like their best of fives is really good, but aside from that lightning in a bottle run that they had in the Korean group stage where they went 9-1 or something like that, for the most part, they're really used to going the distance in terms of their best of five. So in terms of OMG winning a game, I'm pretty sure they're going to win a game. So 100% chance that they'll win at least one game. Okay. But are you talking about likelihood of winning a game in general, like across any given game? Because I'll probably go then maybe, I guess, go pretty high, like 80%, I guess, or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. That's fine. The next question is Starhorn Royal Club.
Can we commercial break?
Well, it's going to be the last thing, and then we're going to be done. Okay.
Well, we'll commercial break and then do questions.
Well, you really want to do... This has been like a 2-hour-long episode.
Okay, fine. This will be the last one.
Has there been any like amazing question? Like someone just like wants to know the secret of life.
I want to do one. What game is OMG going to take off Najin White Shield? Like if they take one game,
it'll be the third game.
Yeah. Okay, that's me.
It will, won't it?
That's what I feel like.
Yeah, it'll be the third game. OMG, guys, I got this. OMG takes forever to ramp. It was no surprise that they got kicked in the teeth in the first game against LMQ. They just do not perform. If you look at their best of fives against Starhorn Royal Club, literally every single time Starhorn Royal Club would open up with a 2-0 lead, and then OMG would have to like come back with it. When they snuck by into the freaking like regional qualifiers, like into Worlds, they did it in the very last goddamn game against LGD, where Cool was like finally like, fuck this shit, picked Ari and decided to hard carry. Like OMG is so slow to start. They have to warm up.
That's my feeling.
Predictions?
Because normally you'd say it would be the first game against Korean teams because they're just so
Because you have
adaptable.
to like sucker punch them.
But OMG is just gonna totally screw it up. So like, and then Najin White
Yep.
Shield will adapt to this OMG like constantly screwing it up, and then they'll surprise them in game 3, and then Najin White Shield will adapt again. So
OMG will
Yeah.
like magically
Their-
wander the way through
their
pick and ban
first game,
phase.
their first game is actually their third game.
I'll say the third game as well. But that's mostly due to OMG kind of waking up. If Shield has something to say about dropping a game, they could drop it as early as the second, where they just kind of where they just kind of convince themselves, okay, I think we got this. Let's just try to, I won't say change things up, but let's try to make sure that we keep them guessing. Try to be a little bit over creative with the way they want to win the next game, and they end up shooting themselves in the foot in picks and bans. So it could be the second game, but I'm inclined to agree it'll be in the third game for sure.
Win percentage, Najin White Shield, Starhorn Royal Club. Start with Kriz,
Oh
since
gosh.
he made the sigh.
No, I just going off of the way Starhorn played this morning. I mean, that is probably their worst matchup. I mean, like, just again going back to Kelsey's article, like they're probably the best bet, but considering just how well they just kind of powered up in the quarterfinals, it's so tough to call. I mean, even I'm like, as a Najin fan, like this is probably the most difficult matchup that they'll have to face. Zero is just playing out of his mind. Like,
Yeah, but then you watched that game. Uzi literally had to strap Cola to his back and drag his dead
Yeah.
body across the finish line.
Cola,
Like, other than
and
play.
that's the really interesting part, because this is where you're going to see a really interesting series. The bot lane for sure. I'll put in. I'll give it to Starhorn for that.
A stretch, right? It's a stretch
No,
to
it's
start.
a stretch. It's well, not a stretch. I mean, they definitely have the ability to do so. It's just it just depends on how well Zephyr plays, and I think he's been playing really well up until this point. Like normally, he's the one who most Najin fans are kind of weary of whenever they play like a meaningful game. But so far in group stages, he's been kind of bossing it up like against the other teams. So I would say that it's. You know what? Give them benefit of the doubt. I think they kind of go even, and I think if they go even, though, that'll actually be benefit to Najin Shield, because Zephyr just wants to make it to the mid game and kind of work with the rest of the team. So,
Why do you think Zephyr will go even with an Uzi zero lane?
I think it's just a matter that he just plays really safe, and Gorilla appeals very well, but it really depends on what team compositions they run. I think if Starhorn decides to try some sort of lane swap situation, obviously we can't really tell who wins or loses in that regard, but Save, it depends on what game plan. If they decide to go camp top whenever they first pick Rise on blue side, I think if you just leave Uzi alone with Zephyr, it comes down to the supports here, because Uzi is going to be, I guess, the aggressor in that case, and then Zephyr is going to try his best to just kind of safely farm his way into the mid and late game, and then Gorilla would just do his best to provide vision to protect him from ganks, and then at the same time kind of make the plays to peel off of him.
So tell me,
Big...
Starhorn Royal Club, what's the percentage that they're going to take down a Korean team?
Oh,
Which
gosh,
I don't think it's ever happened. Has it ever happened?
No.
I don't.
No,
It's
it's never
Best
happened.
of 5? No.
The best of 5.
What is
I'll-
the percentage that for the first time ever a Korean
Well,
team
not
will...
not the first time ever, because
I just asked you guys
prior
if it had
to-
ever happened.
no, prior to
The rise of power of Korea. Let's
going
do
all the way back
season 3
to-
onwards.
since World Elite. Since World Elite.
Well, because TPA took out when they won season 2. Like, go season 3. Since the rise of SKT1.
Yeah,
Okay.
World Elite.
Oh, okay. That's what you're talking about. I'm like
Yeah.
thinking like back to like
Was that,
season.
that was World Cyber Games, was it?
I'm like thinking back to like Moscow 5.
No,
era.
this is like the name of the tournament that everyone. Oh, IPL 5.
IPL.
Since the reign of Korean dominance, will Starhorn Royal Club take down a Korean team?
I don't think so, but it'll be a really interesting match. I'd say I'd give him like 30-35% maybe.
That's the same percentage that they gave OMG.
No, I gave OMG like 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of dropping my OMG percentage and then putting Starhorn at 35.
Starhorn matches a lot better, but they play. I think the deciding factor. Yeah, I think the deciding factor is just how Shield adapts over the course of 5 games. I think Starhorn will definitely be able to take it to the distance, but Shield, I think Shield can definitely pull through in the end. Just from the way they play, I guess. Like they're familiar with that really in your face play style. They played Arrows a lot. Like they swept them really hard in the Korean regional. So if they can do that against Arrows, I'm very confident that they'll be able to do that against Starhorn. It's just that it's really interesting.
I mean, like how
Starhorn...
EDG beat Starhorn Royal Club in regionals, and then lost to Starhorn Royal. This is what I'm saying. Like everyone always goes back to the regionals of Najin White Shield. They are not playing like they did in regionals right now. How Najin White Shield has played, splitting.
But will they?
But that's the thing. Like we thought, will EDG show up? We just we have to analytically say that EDG is going to show up. EDG didn't show up. Name didn't show up. Could the same thing happen to Najin White Shield?
I don't feel like Shield has the same track record that EDG is, so it's like a harder call. I think that they're still very likely to show up. I actually think that Starhorn Royal Club has less of a chance against Shield than OMG. So I thought EDG was the one. Like I gave EDG 40%, but again, that was like banking on an EDG that doesn't exist. So an imaginary EDG.
Throw down the gauntlet, Drexxin. Be the voice of reason. Need you to be.
Dude, I already said 35.
Yeah,
I can't think of it being higher.
You guys are the worst China talk I've ever had. This is like, we should just change our name to Suck Korean Dick Talk. Like,
I don't. I put it. If you put it any higher, it's already 15% within the range of 50%.
Give him at least a 40, 60. Come on, Uzi played out of his mind today. Literally, people are throwing the title of best AD carry in the world. He's going against the weakest Korean AD carry at the tournament. And you're like, man, I think Sepho can just kite.
You have to ask yourself: Does OMG lose to
Starhorn?
Does OMG lose to Starhorn Royal Club in best of 5s? No. Okay.
And that's in spite of Uzi.
And that's in spite of Dada 7. Like
yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
I was just going off of World's performance. I think Starhorn World Club played the best they've ever played, ever.
Oh yeah,
ever.
I'll agree. They've never played this good before.
They're the best looking team outside of the Samsung.
Dada 7.
That wasn't the same Starhorn World Club that we saw show up today, though.
I know, but I feel like that's a huge range of buffer there. Like the Dada 7 buffer.
It's so weird.
And it's just
Dada.
It's just like the solo lane performance is just really a thing. Like especially top lane is such a thing.
So yeah, you can't count out save. Like Insec is gonna have to. He's gonna be on.
Like on certain champions, Corrin can do. Like, I think Corrin might actually be a better analogy for Gung than Cool is, just because his champion pool is super limited, and on, like, certain champions, he can really show up and destroy people. Obviously, he hasn't been that way in this tournament, so he's not as good of an analog as I would think he would be, but, yeah, I don't know. Like, Corrin might be okay, because he'll just play safe. Like, he'll play super safe if he doesn't get a champion he wants. But otherwise, like, Cola will straight feed. So.
Okay, Cola straight feeds. Corrin goes safe. Uzi and Zero, we're going to give them the lane, but we're going to assume that Zephyr and Gorilla just won't feed. Insec versus Watch.
That's weird.
Yeah, we're all just like, eh. It's funny because it's like the two Koreans, so we have some semblance of how they've performed against each other in the past, but we're just like,
it's weird.
Now.
It's weird because
I feel like Insec crushes him mechanically, but it depends on how they play strategically.
It's all strategic here because it really depends
China's
on.
Then we're done. Go home, boys.
It's just from fundamentals alone, that's enough for Shield to rise above.
This is how
above
Shield's
thing.
gonna win, and
It's
Shield
how
better be
Shield,
listening,
and they're just so well prepared for that. They've been playing in that sort of style for I don't know how long. Like that's their bread and butter right there. Like I'd go so far as to say like they've been the benefactors of this rise in terms of like team cohesion and team play over the as a victory over like individual lane talent and whatnot.
But the meta has been shifting towards extended lanes and team fighting, which is part of the reason why Starhorn Royal Club rose to power. Why did Starhorn suddenly get really strong and World Elite fell down? It was because the meta shifted away from the lane swap and into the traditional lanes, which gave Uzi like a huge power spike. And now literally the meta is all extended laning phases, team fight over dragon. Extended laning phases, team fight over dragon, team fights.
That goes back to Save then.
Yeah,
because
but Save hasn't been performing, and what, like, a Chinese team, what are they really good at? Team fighting.
I mean, if he's against Cola, I mean, it doesn't really have to
Well, yeah, obviously, like, it doesn't mow him down, but...
And in fairness, like, and this isn't so much about individual play, it's just a matter of those games that he played pretty poorly against. He played against signature champions that they knew better than to not ban. Like, he played poorly against Wicked's Aurelia. He played and it wasn't individual poor play against...
Yeah.
Like Wick, I'm still not over Wick. Like, I don't know, man.
He's like holding on to it. He's like, damn it, Save.
Like, God, no, it's not so much saying. It's just, damn it, Shield. Like, they didn't ban really away from the Lions. Like, what do you? That's still the most frustrating thing. And
let's just do shout outs. I'm gonna give it to our guests, which obviously, thank you so much for coming and dealing with our shit. I know I like to poke everyone. Just. Guys, I'm the host of this show. I don't believe the shit that I'm saying. I'm just trying to get conversation. So before you flood my inbox, I don't believe that a Korean team is going to lose. I think that they're going to crush OMG. I think that Starhorn Royal Club is probably 40-60, but I think a Korean team will win. So that's what I actually think.
Royal Club is their best chance.
Shout outs.
Royal Club's their best chance, but
I think they're playing really well.
Yeah. EDG is dead.
Do you have anyone that you want to thank? Your mom?
My mom, for sure.
GG Chronicle?
No, shout out to GG Chronicle. They're pretty much my first gig here in esports, writing and all that stuff. So I'm really happy to be a part of their staff. And I'm also really happy to have been asked to go on this show. So thank you very much for having me over, guys.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Again, thank you so much. We were trying forever to find a Korean expert to come out and argue for Najin White Shield.
The thing is, I wouldn't even say that I'm an expert. I'm still I'm just trying.
You gave a 20-minute monologue on Najin White Shield's history and wine tastings.
I am the biggest, and I'm gonna say this now at the end. I'm just one of the biggest fans of Najin as an organization. Don't even get me started on how excited I am about Najin Blacksword. They're going to be making a lot of waves in Season 5 just based on the roster continuity and just how well OQ's been developing as an AD carry. But other than that, Shield just taking care of business as their primary team right now. So I'm just really happy to see where my organization's at. I guess you could say that maybe not so much overall Korean expert, but I'm just huge. If I could just be a Najin beat writer for any site, and I'd be totally happy with that.
I think we lost Mike. So Kelsey, I'm going to give it to you for shout outs.
Okay, so first of all, shout out to LOL Esports, even though we were kind of a little bit mean to them. Shout outs to Deficio, as Mike would say, because he will be casting the OMG versus Najin White Shield games tomorrow, so that'll be fun.
I actually enjoyed the casting today. I thought it was much more critical than they normally do, and I enjoy that type of analysis.
Joe Miller he's been so good at Worlds.
Joe Miller's been killing it.
Deficio, I love the amount of research he's been doing. He's so earnest in terms of his commentary and his observations about the other teams, especially the international teams. His reaching out to Brazilian fans in order to get the information or inside information about Kaboom. I really appreciate that coming from someone. I don't know as much about Kaboom as other hardcore fans, but I just watching them play. I've become a huge fan. I've actually started following the Brazilian scene a little bit more as a result of that. So,
Kelsey.
And also, please follow, as the On Gamers person, please follow On Gamers Twitter and On Gamers Facebook, those types of things. Find more On Gamers content at ongamers.com.
And I'm going to close up the show now. Again, I'm Froskurinn. I don't believe that a Chinese team will take down a Korean team. I just say that to get them to talk. So please stop sending me hate mail. Otherwise, yeah, check out On Gamers. Huge thank you to them for providing us with this platform. And there's that recent article, of course. You can go and see that Cloud is on the official roster, which we talked about at length today. It is debuting on ongamers.com, so be sure to check that out and be like, yeah, #FreeCloud. It worked, boys. Otherwise, have a good night.